Welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to cluster our two VM for SQL Server, that is test01 and test02. In order to do that, the first step is to go to the Active Directory and create a new organization unit, that is the OU group that we're going to use to configure and group our SQL Server. So let's go to the Active Directory. So right now I'm in the AD server. I'm going to open the Active Directory, user and computer. So this is the default setting that came with the Active Directory when it was first installed. I've not made any changes. So the first step here is to create a new OU. So we're going to go here and select new organization unit. I'm going to name this SQL Server Always On. Okay, so this is going to make it easy for us to group all our settings in one organization unit. Now, after this, we're going to create a new security group for this OU. So I'm going to right click on this, go in there, create a new group. So the name of this group is going to be Always On 2022. You just want to make sure you give it a name that will make it easy for you to identify, because in most organizations there's going to be more than one or two always on that are grouped together. You want to be able to organize your computer or your grouping of the computer in such a way that whenever you need to make any changes, once you come to the Active Directory, you'll be able to identify which group a specific computer or a specific server belongs to. So just for the training purpose, I'm going to name these test SQL Always On. It's going to be a security type. So I'm going to click OK. Now, the next step is for us to create a service account. So the service account, same process, come in here and create an account for the user account. So this is going to be the account that we're going to use to connect to each one of the server. This is going to make it secure so that we don't have to use individual users' account during the installation. So we're going to use this account to install the SQL whenever we're ready to do that. So the name is going to be, since this is for test server, I'm going to make it SQL test user. And the same thing, the login is going to be the same thing. SQL test user at abc.com. Like I said earlier, you want to give it a name that will make it easy for you to understand what you're doing. So this is for SQL test because we name our server test user 1, test user 2. That is why I name it SQL test user. Click next, then going to create a password. You want to make sure the password is complex enough to prevent any hacking. The password never expire, and a user cannot change the password because this is a service account. We don't want anybody to go in. It's not going to be easy to log in and change the password at the first login. So this can only be controlled by the manager of Active Directory whenever we need to change the password. Okay, click next. After creating the new organization unit, the next step is for us to create a security group. So that is going to be the group that we going to use to manage our cluster and the server that belongs to that cluster. So you're going to do that by right clicking the new OU that we just create and go to the group. So this is going to be our SQL Server group. So we're going to name this SQL Always On group. Okay, it's a security group. I'm going to click OK. Then we're going to need a service account. Once we start installing SQL Server in test 01 and test 02, we're going to need an account that we're going to use to connect to the database after the installation. In this situation, so in this case, we're going to need like a service account during the installation. By default, the SQL is going to try to use a network account, but the best way to do the installation is to create a service account. So the service account that we're going to use for this installation is going to be created under the Always On so that we can group everything together. So we can do that by right clicking on the new OU and go to the user. So we're going to create a new user. That is going to be SQL admin test. SQL test admin. SBC. SBC is to indicate that this is a service account. So copy this. We use it as a user logon name. Next, we don't want the password to be changed. The user cannot change and it doesn't expire. Click and finish. So now that we have a group and the service account added to the new organizational unit, the next step is to add this account, give this service account access to this group. So we're going to go to the property of this account, add the member. I'm going to look for the SQL Always On group. Check the name, add it. Now our service account has access to the new group, that this new security group that we created for the Always On. The next step is for us to go into the group policy and create a policy that will give access to this account, the new service account, to the local admin. So we're going to look for the group policy here. Okay, find the group policy. We expand, find a domain. This is the new SQL Always On that we created earlier. I'm going to right click on this, create a new group. So it's going to be Always On policy. Always On group policy update. Okay. Right click on this and edit. So since we're planning to add a new group to the local admin group, so we're going to go under the computer configuration, we expand the preference, we expand the control setting under the local user group. Going to right click here and add a new local group. So we're going to add, find a SQL group. Okay, this is the group. Select the group, click OK, and click OK. The group name needs to be added. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to select the group that I want to add. This is going to be local administrator. Then gonna be apply that, click OK. That is how to add the new group to the local administrators. That means we want that group to have access on this domain. Close this. Now that we have a new group set up, we have the OU, we have the group, we have the service account, and we created a new group policy that allow the new group that we created to have access to the local admin. The next step is to move all our server. So if you remember, when we added this new server to the Active Directory, the test01 and test02, they were added under the computer. So this is like a general OU for the computer, but we want to move them into a SQL Server Always On so that we will be able to identify the computers that are set up to be part of Always On. If we leave it under the computer here, so all the computers in the company, all the laptops, everything, they're going to be listed here. It's not going to be easy for us to identify which one belongs to which active. So the SQL Server Always On. That is why it's a good practice to move your computer that you intend to use for the SQL Server Always On and move them into the OU. So we're going to copy the two, right click and move to the new Always On. So if we go back here, right now we have our server, we have the group, and we have the service account that we're going to use to set up the SQL Server when we are ready to set up the Always On. So all these steps that we just did, this is necessary for us to be able to set up the cluster at the back end in the SQL test01 and SQL test02 and be able to configure the Always On. And in some company, if you already have the SQL Server set up and they now decided that, okay, we want to set up the Always On, or this can still be done, all you need to do is to create the new OU, identify the computers that will be part of the Always On, add them to the group, and just follow the same process as we did earlier, and your computer and the server will be ready for you to start setting up the clustering and installing SQL Always On, which is what we're going to do next. So the next step is now for us to go into test01 and test02 and enable the window clustering. Then after that, we're going to go ahead and install SQL Server.